Hello, my name is Bron Grieve. I'm the Community Health Nurse from Dhelkaya Community Health. And I'm presenting tonight a talk called Alcohol, Vaping and Drugs in Young People. Just as a little bit of a background to myself, I'm a community health nurse at the moment, but I was a school nurse for a number of years. I'm a mum of 3 beautiful boys, but more than anything else, I'm very, very passionate about doing all we can to help our young people navigate this very complex world that we're living in at the moment. This is part of a series of talks that I do for Castlemaine in our library called Parenting in the Modern World. Basically, all these talks are here to support, to work as a community so we can all work together to support parents, families, carers, to help us get through parenting in this complex world our young people are growing in. We are all here. I do want to recognise that we are all here for different reasons tonight. This is one of those talks that's very broad and it's very hard to bring it all together. But ultimately, even though we're here for different reasons, we all are here because we care for our young people and we want to have them be the best versions of themselves as they possibly can. Now, what we're going to cover tonight, I'm going to share some of the latest survey results. I'm going to talk a little bit about drugs and alcohol and how it affects the young people's developing brain. I'm going to talk a little, very, very small amount about vaping. I'm going to talk hopefully some tips and tricks and strategies to help work with our young people. That's the main focus of tonight. And there are some resource lists and handouts there. So what I do want to preempt is that this talk is a combination of lots and lots of different experts, different areas, bringing it all into one so that I can sort of, I guess, bring all of the different ideas and thoughts into something that makes sense for everybody. So sometimes I might sound very knowledgeable, but often I come out of things like this with more questions than answers. But it's an absolute privilege to be able to bring it together for you. So take home what resonates with you. Everyone is different, and use whatever we've got tonight to complement your parenting toolbox. And there are lots of resources and a resource list to fill in any gaps that might not be filled tonight. And the reason why my PowerPoint is actually quite wordy is because it is one of the handouts that we've got. So when I'm talking to it, if you need to write notes, you can. If you would like more, I've also got my contact details here, and I'm more than happy for you to contact me, and we will be saving questions to the end. I do also ask that we always try and keep, this is about filling up parent toolboxes. That's my main aim. So if we want to talk politics or we want to talk bigger things, there are other forums for that. First of all, I just want to also recognise that everyone's journey to this point on the path of parenting is different. We've all got different emotions that we come to this space in. And I guess it's looking at this and seeing what resonates with you. Parenting is definitely hard. No one gave us an instruction manual. And we are talking about the most precious people in our lives. So just spend a moment, I guess, finding the ones that may resonate with you and where you're at. And just remember to smile and congratulate yourself, because you're not alone in this journey. You're doing your best, the best that you can in a really complex world. And you have got your young person to the point that they are today. So I think it's really important in this space to remember those things. All right, I'm going to share a few survey results to sort of set off the scene. So this survey was done by 271 young people in our community, and the ages range in between 12 and 18 years of age. We also surveyed 66 parents or carers and 22 service providers in the Mount Alexander Shire. So this is what we came up with. So one of the questions asked was, what are the main issues facing young people? And this was the young people's responses. Sorry about the chopping off at the top there. So as you can see here, outstandingly, vaping came across as the #1 issue that young people thought they were facing between those age groups. Bullying comes in next. Cost of living, alcohol is not far behind that. And drug use, I'm not actually quite sure what's happened to the slide, but that actually is the second one in there. And alcohol came in 7th. So then this was the parents' responses that came up. So the first response that came out from parents is that the main issues facing young people were places to hang out, cost of living. Now, again, I'm not sure what's happened to this slide as it's come up here. Mental health is actually the second one that's come up there. But as we can really, if we really look down through this, vaping has come in as 14th, drug use is 8th, and alcohol use is 19th. So the biggest, other than sort of looking at some of the other details that are in there, the biggest take home from this is what we're seeing with these, the same question asked of both parents and carers and young people, is that there is a really big disconnect between parents and young people. So what's going on here? Are we putting our head in the sand about drugs and alcohol? Are we not seeing it? Are our young people hiding better than what we think they are? What's happening here with that huge difference between the answers to the same question? So this is looking at the top 10 issues. So these two graphs are bringing all of that together and putting them side by side. So alcohol and drugs also identified as one of the top 5 issues with all our GPs in town as well, they're seeing in young people. And I do want to also note that even though young people, we've got vaping, we've got drug use, bullying, and alcohol coming down, not too in that top 10 anyway, that we have mental health problems coming in here at number 2 for parents. So I think we've also got to take that in consideration, that that is also part of that bigger picture of drug and alcohol use. So I know this is very wordy, but what are the most, this was a question asked, what are the most important things you want your parents or adults in your life to know about alcohol, drugs and young people? So this was asked of our young people. So there's a few takeaway themes here. So there's a lot of these are some of their answers. There's a lot of peer pressure to do these things in social groups. It's becoming normalised. This came through quite a lot. Adults aren't realising what a big issue it is to young people. Adults don't realise how easy it is to get everywhere. There's a lot of pressure because you're weird for not wanting to, and it can get you excluded from groups if you're not using drugs and alcohol. It's not seen as fun unless there's drug and alcohol involved in nights. And one of the big take-homes in this is that young people want us to be recognising there's a lot of pressure. It is becoming normalised with our young people, but they do want support. And we need to get better at that. They want us to get better than that. And hopefully we'll answer a few of those questions tonight. This was another question. What do you think is important for you or other young people to know about alcohol and drugs? And this is for some of the answers. They want more real information about the consequences. They want to have an increased awareness of what impact using has on their friends and people around you. They want to know more about addiction. They want to know how to be safe. They don't want it to be seen as cool anymore. And they also want information on paramedics and police and how they can, what happens if they're called, and accessibility of services to help them. So I'm guessing some of these might have been asking for a friend, but either way, they want to make more informed decisions when it comes to alcohol, and they want to be safe. So it's very bizarre. This has happened up here, but I think we can still work with this. So just a very, very short amount of information on some drug information and vaping, being aware that this could be a whole talk. But the Australian Drug Foundation, Alcohol and Drug Foundation, has an awesome card that I really want everyone to know about. And it's got a lot of information on their website as well. So this card basically has got a number on it that you can ring up anonymously and text through a drug or any information that you're wanting on a drug, and it will text back all the information you're needing on that drug. So rather than going into it, there's it's called Get the Effects by Text. That exists, and there's a lot of information on their website. So that's the Alcohol and Drug Foundation. But what I do want to point out that the vaping is not a fad. It's not going away. It's been going on for a few years now. But what vaping is in a nutshell, it's a battery-powered smoking device. It looks like a USB, looks like a pen, that heats up a liquid called an e-liquid or an e-juice or nic juice until it becomes a vapor, and that is inhaled into the person's lungs. So it's got lots of chemicals in that vapor. I just want you to note on here, the graph that we've got, there has been a massive increase in vaping since 2019 and 2013. So yeah, it's definitely not going away. So it is worth having a little bit of time here to talk about it. But what they have found in those chemicals are weed killers, nail polish removers, bug sprays. So due to all of that and this massive increase that is happening, the federal government put in some reforms in 2023, and you can read about them online to try and get some control over vaping. So that's in the process at the moment. So things are happening out there on a bigger scale, but it is still definitely out there. And a lot of the vapes, on top of all of the chemicals that have been found in them, have got nicotine, might not be labelled as nicotine, but do have nicotine in them. A huge percentage of them were found to have nicotine, and nicotine is one of the most addictive drugs known. So we've just got to be very aware of that there is actually a physical addiction happening as well. So why do people use drugs? There are lots and lots of reasons, as you can imagine. But I just want to plant a few seeds tonight. So this was, again, through surveys, what has been brought out about why do people use drugs. So young people's brains, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a while, like risks. They are driven by emotions, they're driven by hormones, and there's not a lot of logic in there. And again, I'll explain that a little bit more later in a little while. They like to experiment. And they're curious. There's this big world opening up to our young people, and they're really curious about it. They want to play with it. Drugs is part of that, and alcohol. Fitting in and social acceptance is also a big one, which we all know about. Another really big one to be aware of is about feeling good, feeling better, forgetting about whatever else is going around them, replacing negative feelings, anxiety and depression. So avoiding feelings. Now, I think that is something really important to be aware of, that is there. So if young people are using drugs and alcohol for coping and dealing with emotions, it's really important to, I guess, break that up, scaffold that a little bit and have a look at where is the root cause of that. So what is it in your home? Is it in their relationships? What's going on there? I think that's really important. Some of them stay awake, falling asleep. Misinformation, thinking it's safe. Vaping is a classic example of that. It has been perceived that it is safe and it's just a water liquid that they're playing with. Gives them confidence, enjoyment. So they can't have fun unless they've got some alcohol or drugs on board. Losing weight, and it feels good. So parents and carers, and I'm certainly guilty of this, we get very, very caught up on the harm of drugs. We get very caught up on all of the nasty things that happen with drugs. Right, absolutely, rightfully so. But when you look at this, we are approaching drugs and alcohol from a very, very, very different angle to what our young people are. These are the reasons they are. So we're almost approaching it from the opposite angle to them. And that's something to explore. Just plant that seed of thought that maybe we could look at that differently. I just want to share this up here as well, this little triangle. And I think it's a really nice one to plant this seed as well. So we teach this when we're teaching mental health first aid to our young people. We often only see the behaviour, and that might be the drug or alcohol taking. But the behaviour is part of a really, really big picture of what is going on in any behaviour that we ever see. So it's like a situation. Is it at parties? Is it with that certain group of friends? What's the situation that is associated with that behaviour? What are the thoughts going on around that behaviour, and what are the feelings going on? So coming into this one up here. So we are only often seeing this. We need to always be aware that this is all part of the big picture of drug and alcohol taking in our young people, or even in the curiosity of drugs and alcohol. So it's also important to know that this isn't new. I think every single person in the room will also be able to relate to when they were young and that curiosity that surrounds drugs and alcohol. But yeah, just plant that one in your mind as well, and this, and have a think about your approach, our approach, and how that may be very different to what we're seeing here. And in addition to all of this, this is what you will see with vaping. So this is where vaping has exploded. And it sort of ties onto the last slide. And this is why vaping has become so exciting. They can do vaping anywhere. It's really easy to hide. In fact, this is a new one that's come out that they're putting the vapes in hoodies, so they can just quickly have a little vape through the little hole in the hoodies. They're putting vapes in gear sticks and in watches and ways, and they're actually advertising to young people how to hide their vape. So it's edgy. If you go online at all, you will see that they've got 1 trillion different websites on how to do really cool tricks with vapes. You can actually do courses on vaping to learn how to do funky things like this. And each one of them has got a really funky name to it. They don't have to share their vape with anyone. Each person has their own vape, so that's kind of cool as well. They're really cheap. They're really easy to buy. As much as the government reforms have come in, they're still very accessible to our young people. They can also submit funky videos online of themselves vaping and doing cool things with vapes and share it. There are lots and lots of flavours. There's a huge number of flavours. There's also a lot of famous people that are vaping, and literally they advertise and they put themselves out there as being cool for vaping. So if any young people are following any of our young people, they're seeing their heroes vaping, so they think it's okay. And as we all know, young people just love to push the boundaries. They love the gotcha moments. So on top of all of the drugs and alcohol that are out there, you can see why vaping has taken off with our young people. So this little graph here is from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, 2022 to 2023, and it's the survey results on tobacco and e-cigarettes. So as you can see here, the reasons that young people were vaping is this purple line here, 14 to 17-year-olds, and then we've got the older people. And the top reason for vaping was out of curiosity. So 73% of our young people are vaping because they're curious about it. Now, we've all been there, and I think, again, that's really important to remember. All of us have been there. We're curious. Of course, we're curious about it. But the differences, and we were curious when we were young, but the differences that are happening today is that there's really easy access. There's a lot of manipulation happening out there when it comes to social media and the advertising industries. They're getting cleverer, and it's become normalised. So the peer group pressure is the same, the curiosity is the same, though there's probably a little bit more out there because there's a lot more coming to our young people. So I'm not saying any of this to justify why our young people are doing this, but I guess it's really, really good to have an understanding of what's going on underneath it all and what we're working with when we're working with our young people. And on that note, I always feel very guilty doing this talk without confessing. So I just need to do a very, very quick confession time. Before I did this talk a few years ago for the first time, I really didn't know a lot about vaping. And I really thought to myself, how can I stand up in front of a group of people and talk about something that I'm just really reading about? So what I did, and I'll make this very short, is that I wanted to put myself in the shoes of a teenager. So what I did is I spoke to a whole bunch of teenagers and said, rightio, I want to vape. Tell me what to do. Tell me where to look. They put me onto a whole bunch of Instagram sites. My Instagram got absolutely inundated with people that were selling me vapes, cheap vapes that were out there, cool tricks that I could do. And of course, I started looking at them. And the more that I looked at them, the more that I got intrigued by this whole thing. I had to click buttons. If they just said, are you over 18? I just had to click a button and say yes. So that was very easy as well. I then went to the shop and thought, rightio, I need to go and buy a vape. So I found out where I buy vapes. I rocked up to the shop, I had this huge array of colours and enticing different vapes and smells in the shop. It was quite overwhelming. And I asked the shop owner, what should I do? He got me really interested in all of these different vapes. I bought a vape. And I just wanted to feel what that process felt like. But what was the big crunch of this came to me when I wanted to actually suck on that vape. And when I did that, I really wanted people around me to witness it. I really wanted to just get an understanding of what it was like. Unfortunately, circumstances came that I couldn't have the people that I wanted around me while I was doing that. And it was the night before I was doing the talk, and I thought, okay, come on, I've got to find out about all of this stuff. And I did the first suck on the vape and went, oh, okay, that's that really weird feeling going down your throat. Oh, let me try it again. I did it again. And then I thought, oh, yeah, that's that velvety silk feeling that they talk about. And then I did it again because I thought, oh, I want to try and blow one of those cool things that they blow out. This went on and on and on until about 6 to 8 sucks later, I suddenly went, oh, my goodness, what am I doing? Now, this was me as a mature lady with some medical knowledge who had done all the research on vapes, and I knew what I was sucking into my lungs. And I had no people around me. I had no peer group pressure. It was just intrigue. But I still did about 6 to 8 sucks on that thing before I went, whoa, what am I doing? And then stopped myself. So what that really taught me was this intrigue, this curiosity, and it helped me to understand where young people are coming from in a very, very small amount of way. Sort of glad I did it. I felt sick afterwards, but I'm glad I did it because now I can see that sort of build up and what goes on around it. It's not just a matter of buying a vape and having a suck on it. There's a lot that goes on around that keeps enticing you. You'd be happy to know now the vape has gone. It's out of Temptation's way, and I'm sort of glad I've got that story to now remember that time and remember it does help me to work with young people as well. I'm not saying that everybody needs to do that. I've done it for the team. Okay, let's get on to drugs and the developing brain. So, drugs and alcohol and developing brain. There is a handout on this, so you're more than welcome to take these to get a little bit of an understanding of it. But the bottom line with drugs and alcohol and our young people is that the young people's brains are, no one's brain is fully developed until they're 23 to 25 years of age. So in teenage years, this is when our young people's brains are doing the most rapid growth they're ever going to do. They're creating all these neural pathways all the way up to their 20-ish years old. Everything gets pruned back to grow again. And if we can just always have a think about this in the sense that the teenage brain is almost like it's shut down and it's being, while it's growing, while we can just get that reconstructed and developed again. So it is at its most vulnerable stage for any drugs or alcohol. So anything that comes into that brain, it's in a very vulnerable state. So those drugs and alcohol that are taken in those teenage years affect those new pathways being formed and the development in those brain cells. So the earlier young people start drugs and alcohol, the more chance of addiction, because the brain is more prone to addiction the younger they are. So it says that the literature says they're 4 to 7 times more likely to become addicted the younger that they start. And 9 out of 10 people with substance addiction, adults, started using drugs and alcohol before the age of 18. So it's in the science. So the frequency of drinking is just as important, is just as important predictor of future drinking problems as the amount that is consumed. So that just let them have one drink is on a Saturday night won't hurt a thing. That has been debunked as well as affecting the brain development. So in a nutshell, the brain is at its most vulnerable. It is fragile and it's much, much, much more susceptible to the effects of alcohol, addiction, delayed development. And in amongst all of that, with this curiosity and this intrigue, it is also at a point where it is ruled by emotions and ruled by hormones and no logic. So we've got two really, really sort of fragile states that are happening. I have found, just I guess anecdotally, that when we're trying to talk to a teenager about why we would prefer them not to drink or do drugs while they are having developed or their brain's developing, this one does resonate with a large majority of our young people. Or passing this information on. So just a really quick little how does addiction happen? Knowing that our teenage brain is more prone to addiction at this state. So if you can just imagine a teenage brain, if we look at it like this. So if we can see this as a brain, and this is our frontal lobe, this is where we do our thinking from. And this part here is where all the feelings come from. What happens is this part is completely shut down, taken away, under construction, gone. So they are just working on the emotional part of things. So these emotions are driven by lots and lots of chemicals and lots of hormones. When a brain is given something it likes, it connects that with pleasure. So what it does is this part releases this drug called dopamine. It releases all these chemicals out to say, oh, I like that. I'll keep releasing it. So the brain gets a bit confused because it keeps releasing all of this dopamine. And so the brain says, well, I don't need to release it anymore because it releases it when we have this drug or alcohol. And I put a little analogy up here with the phone. So you pick up your phone, the dopamine in the brain starts releasing. Well, I'm happy because I got my phone, and your brain recognises that each time we do it. You feel happy. So then your brain says, well, I don't need to release that anymore naturally because it's doing it every time you pick up your phone. That would be very similar to every time someone is having a drug or alcohol. So basically it releases less of the natural dopamine, and then that person doesn't feel the same buzz or the same happiness unless the drug or alcohol are on board or they've got that drug and alcohol. So it's harder and harder for them to feel good with the same amount of drugs or alcohol they're taking because they need to start taking more and more for this brain to go, I need to release more and more dopamine. So that's kind of how addiction happens. So the brain releases a huge amount more of its dopamine behind the little face, 2 to 10 times the amount of dopamine in relation to something that they like, which could be the drugs or alcohol. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. And the teenage brain, without any logic, doesn't recognise this, and that's why they are much more prone to addiction. So again, this is what we're working with, and this is that's the foundations of what we're working with, which help us then to work with our young people. All right, I'm going to get into some of the parenting tips and tricks now that we've sort of got some of those foundations in a nutshell. So what parenting helps and what doesn't? I'm going to get this one out of the way first so that we can get on to the good stuff. But this is the stuff that doesn't help, is not helpful. So waiting until it becomes an issue. So we don't want curiosity to start happening. We don't want experimenting to start happening, and then we start think back to that brain structure and how quickly addiction also happens. And those social groups have already formed and the habits have formed and the situations are then formed. So we don't want to be addressing it then. We want to get in now well and truly before then. We want to start planting seeds. We certainly don't want to be doing it just before the first party they go to because we've already got this sort of heightened sense of what's going on. So what we need to do here is expose our young people to it, not daily, not maybe weekly, just dropping seeds of information. So planting that seed, normalising the conversations so we're not normalising the drugs and alcohol. Because you also got to ask yourself, no, they're not interested in it now, but how long is that actually going to last? So let's start those conversations early. Parental provision of alcohol. So this is the research has come in with this one. So providing alcohol is associated with increased drinking. So as much as we might say, oh, look, I'll just give you a drink to go to the party tonight or 2 drinks tonight, in a young person's brain that has no logic, they see that as, well, parents are okay with it. So if they give me 2, I can probably have 2 at the party. They don't have the logic that goes with that our brains are working with thinking that might prevent them having more. So the research is in that this isn't helping. Inconsistency with messages and boundaries. So what we also need to look at is setting consistent boundaries that are realistic for our young people. So an example of this would be if you've got a young person, for example, who is already vaping, we need to look at have they got signs of addiction? And it's not just the addiction, the physical addiction that we're looking at here, it's the social addiction. If we were just to come in here, we might have a social addiction or we might have a physical addiction. If we were to come in as a parent and say, right, that is it, you must stop vaping, no more vaping. That's completely unrealistic. It's like telling them to cut off their right arm, those friends are not your friends, you can't vape, and all those social situations that you enjoy, they're gone. That's too much. So we need to really look at what the situation is, which will be different for everybody, and work with that. Understanding all those bits that I've kind of brought in before now and trying to understand where the young person is coming from. It's also really important to stick with those boundaries, but be aware that those goalposts are going to be moving all the time, but you've got to be consistent. And I'm very aware that with separated parents, this is a tricky situation, but we need to try and work out some ways to do that. All right, our next one is unreasonably severe or inconsistent punishment. So I think this one's also important to really have a think about where they are coming from. So if what they really like about going to parties or drinking alcohol is the social situation they're in, we don't want to put that on. We don't want to presume that. We want to ask our young people, what is it you like about it? Where do you like doing this? Tell me about where you're coming from with these drugs and alcohol that might be either enticing you or you're using. And ask why. Really explore and then scaffold from there. Don't bring our thoughts over the top. So it's really looking at what does that actually look like. So be really strong with that, but also be very aware as time goes on, social situations change, ages change, our goalposts need to move with that. Then we've got authoritative or comparative parenting. Unfortunately, when we might share our stories with our young people about what we did when we were young, and that we might think that we were pretty cool because we did some drugs and alcohol and we were a bit rebellious. Unfortunately, our young people are pretty egotistical and they actually really don't care. And I know it's a bit of a hard truth, but it's not working with their logical brain. It's also giving them that little bit of well, they did it, I can do it. So comparative parenting, or what we used to do and get away with, isn't something that's been shown to work. Okay, I just wanted to put this little analogy in because it resonated well with me, so it might resonate with some people here tonight. So this is an overarching parenting our young people in the world of drug and alcohol. If we can look back and compare this to when our young people were really young, and our role was to teach them, for example, how to cross the road safely. For some of you, this took heaps of work. I have 3 kids, and my first 2, it was easy, look to your left, look to your right, look to your left again. Right, is it safe to cross? Yeah, let's go. My 3rd, I honestly thought would never be able to cross the road safely, even into their adulthood. So each of our children is different of how we've approached that and what we had to do as parents. We had to do lots of revisiting. We had the occasional runaway across the road. We've all probably experienced that. We had to be very patient, and we had to try and see the road and crossing the road from their perspective. Now, all of us, and hopefully tonight, all of us got there in the end. So as parents, we are, even since we've taught our young people to cross the road, we've been revisiting that safety thing forever. We've been asking them to put on sunscreen. We've been getting to wear helmets, seat belts, jumpers when it's cold, food when they're hungry. All of that is all these safety things we're doing as parents. Working with alcohol and drugs is actually no different to that. It takes work. It takes repetition. It takes flexibility. It takes seeing whatever's going on from their angle. And it takes boundaries. The biggest difference is we're working with teenagers' brains that don't have that logic, but our young people didn't really have it either when you think about it. I've got lots of mixed emotions and lots of other influences coming in. So if we strip it back, if we take the emotion, we take the history, we take other opinions out, working with alcohol and other drugs with our young people is all about safety, just like we've been doing all our life with them. We want to get them across this road, which is not a physical road anymore, it's an alcohol and drug road. We want to get them across to the other side safely. That's our number one goal. How each of us does that is different, but just think back to you have been doing this all your life. I'm hoping that analogy kind of worked because it kind of resonated with me. Okay, so this is now looking at what is helpful when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. There is so much advice out there, and what I've tried to do is break it down to 5 sort of reference points to guide you. And this little picture here is really saying if we're doing the same thing over and over and over again and we're not getting anywhere and we're using the same mindset with that and it's not getting us anywhere, we need to unravel that and look at it differently. So the first one I've got is facts, not emotion. By learning the facts, you not only increase your comfort levels as a parent, because there's a lot of new stuff out there. I can't keep up with it. There's a lot of new stuff out there. We're going to cut through the myths, especially when it comes to vaping. We're going to cut through social media because we've got the facts. And what that does is when we've got the facts, if they're big and we've got a lot of them, we can start to take the emotion out of it. And it also helps our young people and us to work together to make much more informed decisions based on fact. So the more facts we've got, the more emotion we take out. Then once you've got those facts there and you're really understanding them, you can then start to mix in your values, your knowledge of your young person and how their brain works and how they work, your life experiences into those facts. So we still haven't got emotions in the facts. And then they will help you set your boundaries. So facts. Now the Alcohol and Drug Foundation does have a great thing online, just in case you're interested in it, about it looks at what stage your young person is at in their drug and alcohol journey, and it helps to bring each one of these sort of strategies in accordance to where they are. So I know everyone's journey is different with that, and they're in the handouts. It is a challenge, though. The biggest challenge when we've got facts when it comes to young people is being aware of that social addiction. So like I briefly mentioned before, we not only have a physical addiction, much more chance of a physical addiction when it comes to alcohol and other drugs, we also have a social addiction. If you've got the facts, you can put that to the side, be aware of it, but don't have that start to influence what your boundaries and your values are when it comes to parenting your child. But also be very aware that what we don't want to do when we're working with our young people is bringing their friends' behaviours into your boundaries and your way of working with your young people. You'll get a backlash. You'll reverse all the work you've done if you start to, I guess, bring in comments, bring in judgments, bring in thoughts on what their friends are doing. Their friends are really precious to them, and we want to keep that as a separate thing, and that's where the emotions start to come in. Repeat. So keep the conversations alive. Keep opportunities open. So when there's a movie on, or when you're watching TV, or when you're in the car, you've got parallel conversations. See if you can keep the conversations about drug and alcohol alive. The other way to do that, and a lot of people do this in parenting in the centres quite successful, is have a look at how you can carve out some time with your young person on a daily basis or a weekly basis where they know they've got your full attention and you've got theirs. What does that look like for you? When is that? Is it a car drive? Is it at night? What does that look like for you? Is it kicking the footy down the park? Next one I've got here with repeating, it's using any role models you've got, any friends you've got. Tell your friends what journey you're on with your young people and have them say, look, this is the message that I'm wanting to get across. Can you help me in any way? That's getting it brought in by different sources. And then what it does is have that sort of repeated in different ways so that your young person may actually come up with their own conclusions. That's your absolute win. If your young person actually says, actually, I don't want to do this or because of da-da-da-da-da. So they've heard from all different sources and in a repeated way and can come up with their own conclusions. Individualise and be realistic. So be their team, be on their team, be their rock, but have boundaries and consequences that are not negotiable. Sometimes really hard with this one here. Always remember that those goalposts need to be moved as time goes on. And as I said before, with crossing the road, all three of my children, I've had to work differently when it comes to drug and alcohol. I recognise they've got different personalities, different social groups, different friends. They're in a different year. They're all 2 years apart. I've had to work differently with each one of them, depending on how they've approached drugs and alcohol. So it's not a rigid, this is how we do it. Always remember that you are parenting your child. Everyone else's child is different. You've got different influences, different personalities, different friends. It's not linear, except with you being realistic with your expectations and your boundaries. Also with that one there, I think individualising and being realistic is making sure that you always celebrate the wins. And those wins might be really little, really tiny. So is it when they actually have an honest conversation with you? Is it when they actually come to you and say, oh, Mama stuffed up last night or Dad stuffed up last night? That's a win, so celebrate it. So it's a really tricky one because they might have done something really bad, but still celebrate that as a win if they haven't brought that conversation to you before. If they ask a question, that's a win. We're opening up conversation. So have a little look at what the wins are because everyone's will be different and try and recognise those wins. And see, obviously, if you can get your partners onto the same page. I always say to myself whenever I'm working with my kids or even other people's kids, and I always say to myself when I'm talking to them, it's like, how do I get this young person to come back to me? What do I need to be? What do I need to do to have this person return to me, not the social media, not their friends? What do I need to do that? And it's going to, again, will be different for everybody. Empower our young people. So teaching them to manage their own emotions is it's a great thing in general for life. But sometimes we've got those emotions that are ruling what we do. And if we can recognise what those emotions are, and one of them might be when peer group pressure starts to get a bit too much, having our young people learn to recognise that and then giving them the tools how to work with it. So, for example, one of my boys, I taught them to look someone straight in the eye and just say no. Because what they were doing, saying no and then giving excuses. And what that did when it came to drug and alcohol was give the other people who was trying to say, hey, do this, gave them excuses to jump into. So we used to sit at home and he'd look me straight in the eye and I'd say, hey, do you want some of this? And he would just go, no. It took a long time to get there, but that was empowering him to not give any more information except a straight out no emotion in it whatsoever. So it's a great thing to practice for more than one thing in life. Also, the other really good one with that is to brainstorm really tricky situations. So what I used to do with my young people, say, okay, we're going to this party tonight. We've worked out the drug and alcohol with you as an individual, how we're working with that. What do you reckon the worst case scenario is if you're at this party tonight? Brainstorm them and then work out what are we going to do if that happens. So again, we're empowering them to know if this happens, Mum's got my back, Dad's got my back, and this is what we're going to do. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, particularly when we get to safety. The other one in here is empowering them to seek dopamine or adrenaline or happy drugs in other places other than drugs and alcohol. So is it really looking at, do I need to enroll them in a sport? Do I need to get that out in another way, shape or form? Get some passions going that aren't involving drugs and alcohol. So the more facts we've got, the more empowerment we've got, the more that person is feeling empowered within themselves to make sensible, good decisions. The last one we've got on there is safety. Now, part of all our conversations when it comes to drugs and alcohol with young people should involve safety. And ultimately, that's what we need. When we're harping on about things, it's trying to say to them, this is about your safety. It's not a personal thing. It's not a power thing. It's just about keeping my most beloved thing safe. So it's not, and it's not punishment. But you also want to keep your relationship with your young person safe in amongst all of this, and that is absolutely crucial. So this is kind of what this is about, how to keep them safe but keep your relationship safe. You also want to, if drugs and alcohol are part of the life, is letting your young person know that this is not just about their safety, but it's the whole family and your home safety that you're trying to keep safe. So that might change the rules a lot for some people. And as I said, everyone is here with the big spectrum of this. So what does that look like to keep your home safe? One of the really good questions I think when it comes to safety is I would say to my young person, it's like, how or what do I need to do to help you keep safe in this situation? How can we do this together? So part of that is not having drugs and alcohol for as long as we possibly can to keep your brain safe. But in a party situation, what does that look like? Have them be really honest with you and saying how they feel about drugs and alcohol. And that will also help you to work out how you might be able to keep them safe. And if you're not aware of this already, but one of the best things that you can do when it comes to parties is a code word that you and your young person, only you know, but it's their family safety code word. So before they go to any situation, whether it's a party or whether it's anything else, if they get in a situation that they just want out or they need out with no questions asked, they text you a code word. And if you see that code word on your phone, you go straight there. And it's also things like, I need you to send me a pin of where that is or give me the address before you go. That's just part and parcel of what we do. So that's all safety. Hopefully, in a nutshell, that all makes sense. I really want to bring this one up, so I think it's really important when it comes to anything to do with our young people and working with our young people. So listen and silent are spelled with the same letters. I think that's quite ironic. I think that's quite clever. But the message that I really want to get across here is when we really listen, we understand. When we don't really listen, we are only listening to respond. I know that's heavy, but that's big. But when we really learn to listen, we then become curious. And we also really get to understand not just the story or what that person is telling us, but we start to see the feelings, the needs, the wants that are intertwined and underneath that story or what they're trying to say. And then we've got a really good base to work from. So a young person knows when they go to a party, there's going to be drugs and alcohol there potentially. So let's hear how they're feeling about that. Let's really hear. Mouth shut, ears open, heart open. What are they curious about? How are they feeling about them really and truly? Just let them tell you. And don't just come in and tell them not to do them. It's been shown to not work. So really learn to listen. The more we listen, the more respect we get and the more teamwork we will get with our young people. The more we listen, the fewer words from us, hopefully the more words will come from them. And that'll help us to understand their views, their knowledge, their emotional maturity, their curiosity. And when we really listen, we will also get more questions. Questions are good, even if they're ridiculous or they scare the pants off you, questions are good. But remember, when they ask a question, We need to really, really think about what are they really asking here. Not what I want to answer them with. What are they really asking? Don't assume knowledge, and check in that your answer has been what they're actually asking for. So our words hold a lot of power. Choosing the right ones at the right time can have a lot of impact. And another little one in that respect is don't ever use their mates as examples, good or bad or indifferent, because that's a sensitive area. Don't use words like junkie or druggie or drug addict or drug abuser. They're harsh and they don't go down well with our young people. You could say instead that person who uses alcohol or drugs or might be dependent on them. So there are ways to make our words a lot less harsh. And just always remember that empathy and love are always conveyed in our words and the way we say them. So I guess this is just a little bit of a side for any type of parenting, any type of teenage work, but it does really work and really is a good one to remember when we're working with drugs and alcohol in our young people. Okay, so this is our preteens. This is our young people who may not have been exposed a lot, but this is some of our tips and tricks to work with them. Like I said, keep the conversations alive. Use news, TV, movies as conversation starters with it. So we're empowering them, we're planting that seed, we're thinking about it. If you are using a medication, explain what it's for and why you might use that medication. And explain the precautions you're taking when it comes to using that medication. So we understand what drugs are all about. So we're normalising the conversations, but we're not normalising the drugs and alcohol. Open-ended questions frequently. What do they see? What do they hear? What are they seeing at school? Who's doing what out there? What do they know about it? I remember this distinct conversation I had with my then 14 or 15-year-old in the car, and he said to me, Mum, what's the difference between a bong and a spliff or something like that? And I'm driving along in the car, and I was like, gosh, we were talking about it, we were trying to break it down. And then I said to him, just Google it. So he was there Googling away and we were talking about the differences of what we heard. I think that was the conversation. And suddenly I just went, oh my God, I'm having this completely normal conversation about bongs and spliffs and things with my 14, 15-year-old son. And initially I was like, oh my God, Bron, stop it. And then I thought, this is good. He's asked me a question. I haven't pretended I know the answers. And we have normalised the conversation without normalising this is normal for people to be doing these things. But he'd obviously also been exposed to them in some way, shape or form. So my curiosity then kicked in, and then I wanted to know how he was feeling about that or what he'd seen or what he knew. So you can see how we can play with these things rather than shutting down conversations. Taking have fun and not drink or deal with stress. So let them see you. Role modelling is huge. Be aware of how much you are drinking in front of them. It really is just an awareness thing. Avoid saying you need or deserve a drink, because that's again planting these seeds in our young people's brains that's the way that we work with drugs and alcohol. Avoid celebratory drinks or giving drinks in cocktail glasses. So if you're having some sort of celebration at home, let's just not make it all about drugs and alcohol. Show and have them practice saying no. I think this is valuable in every single parenting we've got, is having our young people, you saying no to them and then checking in how they're feeling about you saying no to them, because they have to learn to both receive no, but they also have to learn to feel empowered and okay by saying no and other people accepting that as well. So it's a great thing to practice. And explain what drugs are, what a drug is. So just explaining that a drug is something that affects our brains and bodies and how it works. It can cause mood changes, feelings, thoughts and behaviours, and there's lots of different types out there. So just keeping those conversations open. Harm minimisation, party ready tactics. So now we're moving on to if someone might be starting to be exposed to more drugs and alcohol and what we can do with them. So checking in intentions and feelings. This is something I do even with my 18, 19, 21-year-old. If they're going for a party, I say, hey, what are your plans tonight? What are your thoughts on the drugs and alcohol part of this party? Find out what they're thinking, find out what they're feeling. And you can do that leading up to that party as well. So at least then you know where you're at. But don't do it just before a party for the first time, because we've already got hype and we're already getting a bit excited about things. The code word that I talked about before. So that could be as simple as something that's really, really, really significant to your family, like something like how's grandma, how's the dog, something really simple that no one else will know, but to you, that's a code word between you and that young person, and just make sure that they don't share that code word with other people. Expectations on how they're getting home. So ideally, which I know is super, super, super hard, and I find it incredibly hard at 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever that looks like, is you pick them up. That is the safest way for them to get home. But setting that time that's going to happen, and to tell your young person, if you don't answer, that you happen to be asleep, to keep calling. Don't just call once and think that's enough, and texting, do whatever that looks like. Friends, have more than one group of friends. So at your party, if this mate gets drunk or this one here does, what are your backup plans? Just talk through those situations with them. And who is going to be your safe person? So in that party, like I know whenever my kids would go to a party, I'd sort of say to them, oh, what are your mates all doing with drinking? So who's the person, if you happen to start drinking, who is that person you're going to go to? And it might be the host of the party. Practice saying no, we've talked about that one. I'm really sorry about how these slides are coming out here. Tactics. So one of the tactics is always keeping your glass half full. If you've got something in the glass that you're holding, people are not so tempted to get you to drink more. Just keeping it there and keeping busy while you're partying. So dancing, playing something, doing whatever you're doing, moving around so people don't. You can be, if you've got a plan of I'm going to drink this much, you can kind of helps you keep to that plan. Have a little think about what are your non-negotiables. So things like the time might be non-negotiable. We are getting picked up at this time. That's it. We're not negotiating, and we're not negotiating at midnight. This is the time. Drugs. If that's a non-negotiable, then it's a non-negotiable. You can drink alcohol, but you're not doing drugs. Like that might be. These are just examples. You're not going home with anybody else except this person. Don't change your mind in the night time. So some of them might be having their tracking app. So having the app on that you can always see where they are just at the time of the party. It can be turned off afterwards. So have a really big think about what your non-negotiables are. Coming back to the safety, that's why we're doing our non-negotiables, but have a little think about what they are. And again, don't just talk about the non-negotiables right before a party. This needs to be done leading up to it so that we've got a great plan and we're really happy. We just might need to do a reminder before that party. Really important to teach our young people the recovery position, the first aid recovery position. That's this one on the left-hand side. Look it up if you don't know about it. It is really, really important if they have or they know somebody at a party who has drunk too much and is unconscious, this could save someone's life. So this is a whole talk within itself, so I won't go too far on about it, but teach your young person to get them on the ground, on a hard surface, off couches, off beds, holding airways open and putting someone in a recovery position, and teaching them the importance that if someone has had too much drugs or too much alcohol, or you're worried about someone in any way, shape or form, that when you call 000, their only concern is the safety of the person that they're going to. They're not going to get into trouble even if drugs and alcohol have been involved, even if they're underage. It is the safety of that person that is their main concern. So that's when they call them. Don't be scared to call 000. I'm going to talk to you about this emergency pass out in 2 seconds. Consent and sex and alcohol and drugs. Really important to have this conversation at some stage in our life. No one can give consent for sex if they have drugs or alcohol on board. So really get your young person informed on what is sexual assault, what is consent, and when drugs and alcohol are involved, things can get really, really messy. So let's talk about those things before, because it happens. And that also includes taking photos of people who might have drugs or alcohol on board. Now, you've got a few roles in this as well on the nights of things, or when things are happening, or when your young person is out and about. That's to keep your phone on, not put it on silent, putting it on loud, turning the volume up, staying calm in situations if they don't go right, and answering any calls that come in that night. So just as an example of this, I have one night when one of my young people were off at a gig. I got a phone call from an unknown number. Now, that unknown number was actually someone else from that party who was calling me who needed some help for something that was going on. So, and I was really proud that person thought to call me. So they didn't feel comfortable calling their parents, so that they called me so that I could come and help them out. So any calls that come in, don't just answer the calls of maybe your young person on that night. Turn the phones up, keep them off silent. Just want to share this Emergency Plus app with you. This is an app that every single person, young or old, should have on their phone. It's called Emergency Plus. And when you basically go on this phone, what comes up is a screen that looks like this. You call 000 through that app. And on that app, it has your location, has your GPS coordinates, it has the address that you're at. So an ambulance can get to you really fast. This app is free, and it also has on the bottom of it a thing called What 3 Words. If the emergency services that you're calling say to you what 3 words, they can find you on your phone within 3 square metres of where you are. Really, really good app to have, as well as this Life 360, which basically can help you find your young person within a very small area. These would be non-negotiables for me, for anyone who's any young person, any adult as well as teaching the recovery position, as well as teaching that family code word safety one. All right, so if they're going to a party, planning to drink, we're almost to the end. So plan is to stick with their friends. So this one is one I think is really important, to stay with your friends, and if that's not working, who are your other people, having that plan B. If you go bush for a wee or whatever, then you let someone at the party know you are doing that. Very, very quick story with this one is one of the times that one of my young people were at a party, had one of their mates have a lot of grog on board. Luckily was at the party, but if they had at the party, they sort of were sitting off from the party. If they had gone off into the bush and done a wee and collapsed, they would not be alive today. So really important if you've got grog or alcohol on board to let someone know if you are going off, because if you collapse out there, nobody knows you've gone. So this young person luckily spent a night in hospital, but if they had gone off bush into bush, no one would have known about it. Drink at your own pace, not your mates. So I always say to my young people, have a drink, finish that drink, and check in. Have a little bit of a time in between those drinks. Just check in. How am I feeling? Have I got the buzz? Am I happy with this buzz? Or whatever is going on with that. Or just check in, have a bit of time, drink water in between, and check in with how you're feeling and what you're doing. Talk to other parents. So this is your role. So ask those parents who are hosting the party, what are your plans? So one of the people that I know my kids used to go to was, as soon as the first child vomits, I ring up their parents and go home. So that was their, boundary when it comes to that. So what are those parents that are hosting the party? How are they supervising? What are their non-negotiables? How are they doing this? So another one that a party that I went to was a parent that said to me, hey, can you come along to the party that I'm hosting? They were quite scared, because it is very scary for someone to host a party, because they're putting on a lot of responsibility. Could I come along and just sit with them and have a cheese and wine night? So we sort of just sat and had our cheese platter, and we sort of sat very central. So the kids were kind of walking in and out, so we could kind of check in on them as they were coming in. So you might be able to do that as well. So you're just there, and you're there to support each other, and also ask those hosts, what are their criteria to be calling you? What does that look like? Eat and drink before they go and while they're there. So again, with the host, you might ask them, are you providing food while you're there? Stick to one type of drink. Don't mix out drinks, and don't do drugs with it. Like we talked about before, what are your hard boundaries and what are your non-negotiables? And we're talking about them weeks leading up to this. Now, this one here I think is funny. The drinking games, for example, beer pong. It's fun, but it's very, very hard to calculate your drinks. My now 18-year-old, I'll never forget picking him up one night And he was quite chatty and quite fun with it all. And I sort of said, "Oh, did you drink tonight? I didn't think that was in the plan." He goes, "No, I wasn't drinking." So what were you doing then? He goes, "I was playing beer pong." And I said, "Doesn't that mean that when you lose, you have to scull?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah, but I wasn't drinking." So he's, again, no logic, all emotion, playing beer pong, but hadn't associated that with going out and drinking that night because he was just having fun playing ping pong as far as he was concerned, forgetting about the skulls in between. Drink spiking, so ways to get around this one. There's lots and lots of stuff online about this. But one of the ways I saw young people do, which I thought was very clever, is that they had one room that was set aside, especially the girls. They would put all their drinks inside that. They would close the door. No one was to go in that room except them. And then they'd go in there and fill up their cups and bring them out. And they'd always make sure they were holding those cups and not putting them down, and that they didn't take any open drinks from anybody else. So there's lots of stuff online about that one. Top-ups are dangerous. Let your young person know. Finish your drink. Don't just keep topping up because you've got no idea how much you're actually drinking. Arrive early. Arrive late, leave early. I think everyone looks ugly after midnight for a lot of people. So just keeping that in mind, that a set time is usually a really good time, and anything after midnight usually starts getting messy. And I've just put down there the letters of the alphabet because you've got to have plan A, B, C, D, E. But just, I guess this is in a little bit of a nutshell. This is kind of just all of those things with a nice little document, and I have got that as a resource up there, which is a good one to remember. Drugs. So again, I'm just talking harm minimisation here, some extra, just some things to be sharing with our young people. You can never be 100% sure what is in a drug mix, and you are gambling with your life when you take drugs. So even if, and this is what young people will come back with, even if they say things like, "Well, my mate took it and they were fine," or "We had it last time from the same dealer or the same person," or whatever that might look like, every single tablet or every single drug that comes out of whatever that is coming out of is mixed differently. So you can't work on that logic. Avoid mixing alcohol and drugs and medications, really important one. And again, that might be forgotten. If we're talking harm minimisation, if that young person is taking drugs or someone is taking drugs, then let someone else know that you have what you've taken, and so they will be aware. So here's an example when I had to go and pick up a young person from a party one night who was very, very, very unwell. We had no idea what they had taken, so it was really hard to know what we were working with. If they had turned to a mate and said, "Hey, I've just taken whatever," then we could have worked with that person a little bit easier. So I guess just tell them to tell someone what they've taken. And check in frequently. So yeah, that things can change very, very quickly. So if you've got a friend and you're at a party and they have taken something, check in, tell your person to check in frequently with them, or vice versa. Check in frequently with them, say, "Yep, I'm fine, I haven't got anything happening yet," just so we can know, because things can turn sour very quickly when it comes to drugs. If you feel unwell, let someone know very, very early. And again, that number that I've talked to you about before is great to know what that drug is, what to expect with it, and it gives you a lot of information on the drug that person's taken, which might help someone to know what to do. And again, those backup plans, the code word is also very, very important. All right, we are so close to finishing out. How do I get my kids to stop? Again, this is a whole talk within itself, but work from the bottom up. Ask yourself, why are they using? What is tempting them? What is their social situation? And scaffold from there. Are they trying to escape something? Is it due to anxiety? Is it due to pain? Is it just because it's fun? Have a really good think about what it is from the bottom up of why we're using drugs. Really important to focus on what you need as a parent, as a carer. What support do you need? What resources are out there? What advice and what friends are there? One thing I will say with this is I have had friends who have had young people going through some drug and alcohol issues. And what I realised after a very long time, I thought I was being a great supportive friend, and we would banter away trying to work out the best way to work with young people. And it all got a little bit too much at one stage, and I thought, gosh, I need to contact someone to get help for me. to support my friend. And when I did that, I rang up some drug information helplines. And as soon as I started talking to them, I realised that I was trying to help my friend with their children with drug and alcohol problems, but that was not being a really good friend. And the reason was because it is such a specialised area that I just needed to be their friend, not advisor on drugs and alcohol. It is so specialised, and we need those people who really, really know their stuff. So you're much better off being a friend to someone or getting a friend to just be your friend, not get advice from them. I think we need specialists involved with this a lot of the time. Think about alternative dopamine drivers. That's like getting all those passions, trying to work out different ways that that young person can get interested and passionate about life. Keeping them busy. So, yeah, do we try and get them into work, try and get them busy with other things? Now, bribes are really tricky, but if they do fill in time for you and do help you, then I don't think there's anything wrong when it comes to this. But again, just thinking about all we've learnt and we've heard about tonight, there might be some better ways, but it might be an interim that might help you. So, yeah, sometimes a compromise is a better way than a battle that you're going to lose anyway. So, again, just thinking about what you may need to compromise to keep that relationship, to keep things going, but also not supporting anything that is dangerous with our young people. But it's bigger than us. Concentrate on or celebrate every small win. We've talked about that before, so I think that's a really important one. And again, when it comes to this, if your young person hasn't talked to you before about it, suddenly does, or they go to a party and they don't take something, or they ring you up, even if they have taken something, they may be wins. So really have a think about what are the wins. Concentrate on the benefits of stopping with the facts, not fear tactics. So again, going back to what I said earlier on, use facts as our base to work from. There is a bit of a thing out there with young people as well that, and it sounds terrible, but our young people are often entertained by our fear of drugs and our fear of all of this. And so, but they're not entertained by facts. So we don't want them to be just thinking, yeah, they're scared again, they're carrying on. Facts do bring it home a little bit faster than fear tactics. Physical distance from drugs and alcohol. Does this mean for a period of time it's worth you going away, going on a holiday, removing that young person from this situation so that they can actually feel what it might be like without drugs or alcohol? And this has happened, and I know a few people that this has really benefited from, even if it's just a weekend or a week where they haven't been involved with drugs or alcohol, if they're taking them frequently, to actually feel what it feels like to not have them on board. And that can sometimes be that turnaround point, or at least plant a seed in their brain of how they might feel without drugs or alcohol. Remember how their old self might be. Never, ever, ever give up on your young person. Now, this is so hard sometimes when and if we do have drugs and alcohol in our lives, but don't give up. If we give up on our young people, it's just this sign of them not feeling loved, not feeling supported, and it's so hard not to. But sometimes it might be saying to them, you have really, really pushed the boundaries on this one. You've gone too far, and I'm really super disappointed. I'm super angry, but that doesn't change my love for you, and it doesn't change that I'm still here for me or for you, but know that you've pushed it too far. So that still holds them. And in that, we're being a bit of a warrior, not a worrier. We're not fighting against our young person, we're fighting with them to help them get through this stage in their lives and keep them safe. But sometimes we do have to do some really big changes and take big risks to change things. So that is it. And I know it's a huge amount of information. I really, really hope that in amongst all that information, something resonated with you. You can take something home from this to help you in your journey, no matter where you are with your young person. And if not, for somebody else. So thank you for coming. And this PowerPoint is in a handout. My contact details are there, and we're very open to any questions whatsoever. Thank you.